Hello, U.S. History. As I told you guys in the email yesterday, and uploading the new guided notes, I think you guys have those too. Our sort of scope and sequence for the next week and a half is today we'll start in on America's teenage years, or really the age of progressivism, or the progressive era, which spans from like 1880 to about 1920. Some say, well, what about the Gilded Age? Some of you in Mr. Thorne's class got that, but we're focusing on this because it's a little more substantial for the objectives of the class, and historically, for any class you take in college, etc. So we'll be covering that today, tomorrow, and Tuesday. So like these 3 days, you'll see probably 3 parts of this. Like Progressive Era, Part 1, Progressive Era, Part 2, that type of thing. And then next Thursday, we will have a review module, right? Going over both America's teenage years and also Reconstruction, right? So those are the topics that we're going to be discussing in that test for Unit 2. So that's the plan in terms of what to see. Then May 4th, as I mentioned, is going to be the test. I will send out, like we did before, I'll send out the Unit 2 test, and you guys will do it, fill it out, and then also send to me. And I saw a couple kids, not too many, who sent me the notes for the section on Reconstruction. I don't need those yet. I need that Reconstruction notes and Progressive Era notes on May 4th. Like when you turn your test in, you send that to me as well via email, and we'll be good. So that's what we have. I do know that the dates for a lot of these assignments recently have been on like a little bit funky dates. Interesting how that works out. You can read between the lines on that, I guess. Let's see. And then we'll do our Unit 3 test after, or Unit 3 sections after that, our last unit, before the end of the school year. So that's the plan. I will give some feedback for you probably at the end of the notes as to how the assignment went. It was pretty good. In fact, I'll tell it to you now because I'm thinking about this. I think for next test, the May 4th test, you will be prepared on the free response, like rice baby, restate, identify, continue, example. Make sure that you don't give me just like hash marked answers in the margins, like probably on that free response, even if it looks like you could like write it in there, probably want to separate it out on another sheet of paper. I think Keziah, I think Caitlin, there were a couple of you who did a good job in just like trying to separate it out, and I think that's the way to go. For the assignment that you guys just turned in, again, it was very good. I really, Ellie Payne, man, like well written. I mean, because think of the questions I'm asking here. And that's why I wish we could have done this in a classroom setting. You're talking about race relations, some of the heaviest things in U.S. domestic policy, because we have such diversity. You're talking about equality of opportunity, equality of result, what's right, what's wrong. You're philosophizing. You're wearing your Plato robe and like to be or not to be. Like you guys are really thinking of some heavy stuff, and I really appreciated when people took a little bit of a philosophical stance. I'm glad some of you jumped into that. In terms of the grade, what got the credit, what didn't get the credit, the one sticking point, and I like some of you were like, I alluded to it in notes about equality of opportunity, equality of result, but you're like, I need to do a little bit more research. Yes, you should have. Because equality of opportunity, just to make sure, the only things that got wrong on the assignment really were these 2 definitions. So if I said unclear definitions, Brooklyn's good, a lot of you got it right. But if I wrote unclear definitions, it's referring to equality of opportunity and equality of result. Now remember, after all the failures of Reconstruction, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, and they got it so close, but then they just gave up because it was just so overwhelming. Of all those successes and failures, the civil rights movement in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and 60s were so fed up. Like initially they wanted equal opportunity. Give us an equal opportunity for success, an equal chance to actually get ahead in life through jobs, housing, voting, all of that. But then things soured, or they got so jaded from the experience that even leaders like Malcolm X, etc., Black Panther movement wanted to have equality of result, more of a communist socialist idea that whether you have earned it or not, we're just going to give it to you, almost giving you like a leg up. Almost giving, some could say an affirmative action thing could be an unfair advantage or reverse discrimination, where in the race, the equal opportunity is that everybody's lined up on the same starting line, same spot, and gun fires. Equal result is going to say everybody gets a gold medal at the end, right? Like that's where equal result is differing from equal opportunity. That's the one sticking point that some people got lost on. And so you'll be getting some points off if you didn't have that correct. So that's what I mean by saying unclear definitions. Okay, so knowing that, let's not get into Industrial Revolution. My lovely mother has been, so artsy and wonderful, tied to choreography, tied to being a seamstress, quite traveled in her early years as a seamstress. And she, what's the right way to say this? She had a lot of fabric growing up. I mean, like, ton of fabric. And I didn't know this until my biological father, like he brought the point very close to home. He said, and he was an engineer by trade. He's like, yeah, this is my engineer and all that. I'm an engineer by trade. And you think he'd be more like harsh on this, but he made a very compelling point that fabric you see over there, son, the clothing that people wear and the tailoring that people wear is one of the single greatest drivers of all of the mechanization, urbanization, and industrialism that has happened in our country. I'm like, it's clothing, who cares? And as I was older and researched and learned that as a historian, it's like, yep, Industrial Revolution, if you haven't covered it, has so much to thank because people like to have tailored clothes. Yeah, other things were benefited, but people wanted to have tailored clothes. That's it. Raw materials, then processed. How do we process them quickly? Middle class, getting more tailored clothes that then you could sort of feel like you're bourgeoisie, upper class, tailored clothes. So that's a big thing about this when it comes to steam and Industrial Revolution. Okay. Under Industrial Revolution, you had two things you're going to write down here. No, we'll do three. We'll do three. First is, by 1850, Britain became the leader of the textile industry and its technology. 1850, Britain became the leader of the textile industry and its technology. Right? So we think textile industry. Think of Charles Dickens' novels. You're in a mechanized room, urban area that is dark and city and poor working conditions and please sir, may I have some more? Like that whole idea of the orphanage and Oliver Twist. Ruddy, rough conditions. That's born in this time when Britain was like at the forefront of processing all the world's raw materials and making clothes that could be mass produced for everybody. And they were the leader. So after Civil War ends and the U.S. is like, but we want to come into the forefront too. The second thing you're going to write down is America wanted the same. So they overlooked the problems of Reconstruction to jump into the industrial age. They overlooked the problems of Reconstruction and they jumped into the industrial age. Now that might sound like a pretty harsh judgment, but many historians agree that when looking at the past, there were probably some domestic issues that may have needed to be handled, but people were so tired from the Civil War era and Reconstruction and Andrew Johnson's impeachment, though he stayed in office and all those things, they were so tired of it, they said, well, money, let's just go forth for that, the American dream. So they overlooked those problems and jumped into it. They really put a big push to have not sending all of our materials, think cotton gin, all that stuff, to Britain to make, but let's make it domestically. Let's make it here in the U.S. so that we can vie for control of industrialized products like Britain has and making money. Because remember, you got to be clear here. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of you think clothing doesn't make it all. It does a big part. Prior to this, only those who were in the elite 1% of the 1%, whatever, who had clothes that were tailored to their body, right? And weren't piecemeal sewn together with rags, so to speak. That's all, even up until 1850. And all of a sudden, there's this opportunity through having a steam wheel that could highly improved mechanization for even a sewing machine or sewing different products, that was introduced. That meant that the upper class wouldn't be the only people who had tailored clothes. That means a burgeoning middle class could come to play, who they weren't lower class subsistence farmers who were living, hand to mouth. Whatever they made, they ate, and that's it. They weren't really selling bumper crops. They could be in the cities and have a little bit more tailored clothes. You have the size advent of large, medium, small, all that stuff that starts to happen because of this. And the U.S. wanted in on it. So the final thing you're going to write down is, to do so, they needed to find a new revolutionary source of energy. Beasts of burden weren't going to do it. You've seen a wheel being turned around by having a donkey beast of burden doing it, or slave labor, human labor, pushing a wheel, or even water wheels. That was not an efficient use of energy. So, what's the source? Steam! Exclamation mark. That's our next section. You'll see two things you want to write down in this. Is by burning coal, okay, fossil fuel, by burning coal, vapor and steam could be collected in pistons. The pressure would overflow, pushing the piston up and down, moving a steam wheel. All right, so by burning coal, vapor and steam would be collected in pistons. The pressure would overflow, pushing the piston up and down, moving a steam wheel. So I don't have a diagram here for you, but you can visualize it, that if you imagine a big old steam engine, right? Think of a train. You need some source of energy to move a wheel, because moving a wheel for transportation, you got to go someplace, cool. And it's a mechanical horse, if you will. It's not the actual horse beast of burden that can be more efficient, carry more stuff in one load. So you need to have a big old coal pit. Boom, let's put the coal in, let's burn it. And then you have vapor and steam that is released in that burning, right? So you burn it, and that vapor and steam there, and that's caught in a piston. And then when it overflows, it builds, and then goes down. And as that movement of the piston goes, it's attached basically to a mechanism that goes to a wheel. And when it goes up and down, think of one of those like push pedal sewing machines, right? We're not going to push that pedal anymore. We got a steam powered sewing machine, woo, that can help actually sew without that manual labor, so to speak, as much. And that wheel spins and goes, and can move in a train, can move in a steam wheel. And that's the ingenious thing, that steam-powered punk thing that is the Industrial Revolution. Okay, the second thing you'll write down in this section is the steam wheel replaced the water wheel, beast of burden, and other wasted manual labor. It replaced the water wheel, beast of burden, and other wasted manual labor. It's not as efficient. I mean, you've seen the water wheel. Like if you build something close to a waterway, then you can harness the power of water, push a wheel to then grind corn, to push a wheel that can be used for making clothes, or etc. Whatever, you can do that for a sewing machine and processing and tailoring. You can do that, but you are limited by what? Caitlin, what are we limited by? Ding, ding, ding. Location. Yay, geography. You can only build it on a riverway or a waterway, and that's limiting. So water doesn't need to build there. Cities start to prop up in different areas, Midwest areas, that you start to see, factories going where they can just burn coal and have smoke stacks, and they can burn that and have those pistons moving and keep it going. Beasts of burden are still used, but nowhere near as much as it is before for like wheel turning, etc. The other thing that's important during this is the advent for eventually the car, the internal combustion engine, where fossil fuels burning something can have enough energy released to push a piston up and down that then spin something. That's it. Think about internal combustion engine to this day. You look at that. You have a fossil fuel in there that has a spark that then has enough to have the piston going up there. That sound effect of the piston is worth its weight in gold. I hope you're very grateful and appreciative of that. That pretty good, I know. But that piston going up and down is the process they're trying to find. And while steam was used more for factories and not so much for cars, it creates the same model for the internal combustion engine. Okay, So this is what they're going into. Cool technology. Let's harness it like Britain does. There is the good, the bad, the ugly. This whole process of doing this doesn't have its share of consequences, right? As we'll find out with nuclear energy or anything that is new, it's cool, but it's also dangerous. Your cell phones, it's dangerous. I've had students, and it's unbelievable to me, since we'll know how to communicate via cell phone using like apps, etc., but like simple desktop applications of email or attachments are beyond them and are like, oh my gosh, like that's one of the unintended consequences is if you only use a cell phone with a specific app but don't know how to navigate like a desktop application, that's like, ooh, we've done a disservice to people. So with that, there's the good, the bad, the ugly of this industrial revolution. There's three things then you'll put down in this section. The first is the good. Okay, let's get to the good. The average standard of living went up during the Industrial Revolution. The good, the average standard of living went up during the Industrial Revolution. More people had nice clothing, electricity, and heat. More people had nice clothing, electricity, and heat. And that makes sense because, again, with Thomas Edison stealing stuff from Tesla. Oh, did I say that? I mean, Thomas Edison being a highly competitive rival to Tesla and all that stuff. Light bulb, AC, DC, all the current stuff, right, was able to be an advent for homes, and that could be powered by steam plants. If you could burn coal, spin turbines, create a charge, that charge is sent to homes into your lovely outlets. More people had electricity, same thing for heat, and for nicer clothing. Average standard of living went up. A middle class has started. Great. And in fact, you could almost parallel this to many developing countries in the world today. If I had you for world history, it's easy for us to make, judgments on them and saying, well, they're just developing. They don't have what we have. They would want what we have, but what we have also brings other problems. Okay, so let's get to the bad. Second thing, the bad. The bad. More people lived in the city, causing an increase in disease, crime, and general anxiety. More people lived in the city, causing an increase in crime, disease, and general anxiety. Hey, you guys are living what's going on right now. The fact is Utah is by and large one of the few states that doesn't have a full quarantine. We have a stay home, stay safe thing, which is pretty much the same thing. But the Intermountain West doesn't have nearly as many problems with COVID-19 as New York City does, right? Because disease, it just happens. Who's our math genius in the class here? Hunter, take it away. Talk about biology. Why is it that a highly urban area can cause mass illness? Yeah, contagious, left and right, everything, touching, hands, nose, mouth, everything. You are living on top of each other. You are in a rat cage. And not to even mention, I mean, you don't need to write this down, but fecal matter and fecal waste, they didn't have septic systems. So it's sort of like the cart before the horse here. They had all these cities, highly urbanized areas. Let's make money. Cool. We're going to move to the city. New York, Chicago, St. Louis, we're going to move. Boom. We go and we move there, and we work in a sort of working class factory. And as we're living there, though, there's no public sewage sanitation, septic systems, and so many people during this time, 1880s, 1890s, they would throw their fecal matter outside the window in an alleyway and just, there it is. Watch out. Talk about disease from that alone. And then later on, they got better on sewage and sanitation, but cities can be rough that way. And even during this time, general anxiety, you might think, oh, that's such a millennial snowflake study that we look at today. Even then, those who are city planners were like, we have a problem because people have a general sense of anxiety and distress from being around so many people. Being exposed to so much can be cool, but it's also a general level of stress that just keeps people on edge a little bit. And then, not to mention crime. And you might think, why does crime happen more in cities? It's more opportunity. It's more available. It's there. Then you've seen the Office episode where Dwight's trying to trap an ex-convict into stealing money from him. He's got money in his back pocket, exposing him, trying to tempt him. In that same way, cities can be similar in that there's a huge opportunity there because people are stacked on top of each other, and you can have one action where you could be up hundreds of dollars. And stealing, theft, Whereas if you're living out in the middle of Idaho and your next closest neighbor is 12 miles away, that's too much effort. Cost benefit, it's not worth it. And so many people in a city, it's easier to get lost in too, right? Like you can steal and recede to the shadows. So that's probably some of the reasons why crime happens more in cities. Not all the time. So that's bad. And then we leave the ugly for the last part. The ugly is this is where the worst parts of the Industrial Revolution rear its head. The ugly, last thing here for this section is many children died in mining accidents. Many children died in mining accidents. It's like you're mining, hi-ho, we're off to work to go, mining. You're mining, excavating minerals and coal. Because the thing is, all right, sounds good. We got coal, we burn it. We smooth the pistons and steam wheels, and we've got energy, electricity, heat, internal combustion. Awesome. Better mechanized living. At the same time, you've got to get the coal from somewhere. Forget that it's a fossil fuel. Forget that it's not really renewable. They're not thinking that way. To get it, many children died in these mining accidents because child labor laws, there weren't compulsory laws that forced students to go to school at this time. Eventually it was, but it wasn't. Because parents were like the king, queen, and ruler of their children, the government stayed out of it. And they said, yeah, go and work for the family. Go and work, not just in mines, but also in clothing factories and in Charles Dickens style factories. These child laborers were there instead of schooling. Schooling, sometimes you had to pay for it. Sometimes it was given as public service. But why go there and not earn money when you can go and earn money, right? There's that freedom that people had, but it caused mining deaths for children. That was the worst of it. In fact, we'll get to not a mining accident, but one of the worst things that happened in all the Industrial Revolution for the U.S. preceding the Progressive Era. So you're wondering, well, what happened where then, U.S. students, if you decide prior to being the age of 16, don't go to school, a truant officer, there's compulsory laws, Department of Child and Family Services will get involved. What happened to where the government got involved? Well, we'll talk about it next time. There's a couple things that happened where sort of the camel's back was broken. But I hope that helps. We'll get to more of this tomorrow and then Tuesday. So I hope that helps. Hope you're doing well. Stay home, stay safe, all that. And yeah, have a good one.